Well, we should keep it in context. I think it's a real pity that Zach Goldsmith didn't get re-elected. He'd done the honourable thing. He stuck to his word. But of course, in a democracy, the voters are always right. And congratulations to Sarah Olney. But I think we should keep a sense of perspective here. She won 20,000 votes and 17.5 million people voted Leave.
Yeah, this was a by-election, though. I mean, this was the first verdict since that referendum on
Well, it was a
Brexit.
by-election in a very, very strong Remain area, a constituency where something like 70% of people voted Remain. Obviously, if there'd been a by-election in, say, Romford, it would have been a very different result. So it doesn't really tell us anything that we didn't know on the 24th of June.
Alastair Campbell, doesn't really matter. It's a single little snapshot in a seat that was overwhelmingly Remain, a metropolitan rich seat.
I mean, I don't think you should read, as David Grossman said, you shouldn't read too much into it, but I do think there is out there, not just in places like Richmond, but around the country, a sense that the debate that we're having now is the debate that we should have had before June the 23rd. And I think people are beginning to worry that this government does not have a strategy, doesn't know how to handle these negotiations. The autumn statement, I think, really shook people up into, 2 trillion debt, all the talk of Daniel and his colleagues about more money for the health service. It looks like we'll end up with less money for the health service. I think this is all playing into the idea that Brexit means Brexit, says Theresa May, but Theresa May doesn't really know what Brexit means at all. And so people are getting confused. I think quite a lot of people are getting angry that actually the biggest decision that we've ever taken as an electorate, the government doesn't know how to handle it.
But that did not actually result in a good night for you last night. I mean, there were more members in Richmond than there actually were Labour votes, which would suggest that actually, tactical whatever, but they knew it was much better to vote for the Liberal Democrats than vote for you.
Well, I think that the Liberal Democrats, a bit like the SNP, do have a very, very clear line. I would like the Labour Party to be much clearer about fighting and holding the government to account in a way that I think Keir Starmer has been trying to do, but he's been completely undercut by John McDonnell, and I assume with Jeremy Corbyn's permission.
The truth is that Labour is in a mess over this, Olly Grender, and I wonder, from your point of view, is it, as it can't really be, as Tim Fallon said, back with a big bang, because look at the results you had in the referendum in a lot of your heartland areas, the south and the north. This is a specific metropolitan seat.
Well, I think nobody is going to argue that if you extrapolate anything from the general election result for us, it's going to look anything but bad. But what was extraordinary, and what by-elections often do, is they're kind of like a shock or an electric shock to a current situation. I knocked on a lot of doors in this by-election and people were raising Brexit all the time. They have loads of questions. The questions are content-rich. They really want to know what is going to happen. And as the Institute for Government said, silence is not a strategy.
No, but does it
that
suggest...
is the strategy of the government.
Does this suggest that actually people have a different attitude towards... I mean, there's a pick and mix now, but also the attitude that actually Labour and Liberal Democrats should actually get together and not oppose each other in areas where there's a strong Remain vote to be had?
Well, I think there's a debate at the moment, which is a valid debate, about what happens, given that we're in the electoral politics we are. However, I think that, the Labour Party and the leadership of the Labour Party is in a very different place from the Liberal Democrats at the moment with regard to the Brexit question.
Daniel Hannan, do you think that a similar duality should exist between the UKIP and the Tories, and in order to get, as far as you were concerned, the best deal for Brexit, there should be much more alignment, much more working together?
I mean, all of those questions presuppose that we're somehow refighting the referendum, and we're not. I mean, more people voted to leave the European Union than have ever voted for anything. I don't think it's fair to say, as Alastair was doing just there, that no one knows what Brexit means. I mean, the very clear thing that people voted for was to take back control of our laws, so that instead of being subordinate before a European court, we take our own decisions. But that doesn't mean turning our backs on Europe. It doesn't mean...
Remain, what you might say is that Liberal Democrats, Labour, MPs in Northern Ireland, SNP are aligned against you. They have, in a sense, got a block.
Well, yes, but that was put to the country specifically on the issue. Should we leave the European Union or should we remain? And people voted to leave. And there's no point in sort of gurning about that. I do think it's reasonable, though, to say that it was a narrow margin, that the 52% can't disregard the 48%. We need to try and find a status that is looser than the existing one, that may go too far for some people, not far enough for others, but that both sides can at least live with.
So
and
you,
I think
you accept, Daniel Hannan, because you have been so much the godfather of Brexit, if I might put it that way, you do accept that this is going to be a very tempered negotiation now. Of course, we heard David Davis in Wales only yesterday, that actually it's not going to be a lot of what people in areas of high unemployment, areas of high immigration actually wanted.
Well, I think I've got slightly more sense than you have, Kirsty, of what they wanted, having spent the campaign speaking in a lot of those areas. And what people really wanted was to be back in charge again, that we should make our own decisions. Now, of course...
Back in charge
of course, that doesn't mean...
Let me put that to Alastair Campbell. Let's take Burnley, for example. You know, Burnley voted strongly to leave. So, you know, you have no locus there, the Labour Party, as it stands just now, because what you're offering them, the prospect of the negotiations that you want, is not what they want.
But if I said earlier that I think we're now having the debate that we should have had before the referendum. The referendum campaign on both sides was dire and awful and wretched. The public now, I think, are waking up to the consequences of what they've voted for. And I think that at some point, so you have to ask...
But that would suggest that that's kind of patronising, because that would kind of suggest they didn't know what was happening in the first place.
It's not patronising at all. What Theresa May and others keep saying is the British public voted, they gave a very clear message. They didn't. Daniel, for example, Daniel was clear through the campaign, this is not a vote to come out of the single market. The extremists now were all saying this was a vote to come out of the single market. That debate is not yet settled.
On that basis, then, do you go along with people like Clive Lewis and Lisa Nandy and saying what you want is a progressive alliance? And actually you have to listen to the way people want their politics delivered, and it's not the way it's being delivered now. It's a more thoughtful politics, a more nuanced politics.
Well, look, Olly's spent a whole life trying to get proportional representation. The public had a chance to change the voting system. They voted against it in a referendum.
Yeah, I seem to remember one day when Tony Blair was very happy to think about giving Ashdown a seat in the cabinet.
He was, but I don't think out of this by-election, you talked in the introduction, this is leading to a great realignment. Yeah. I don't think so at this stage. What I will say, that I think that Brexit, and nor is the next general election all going to be about Brexit, but where we are now is that Theresa May has said she's going to trigger Article 50. She's done it, to my mind, throwing away a very big card too early. And then we're going to get into negotiations where, frankly, I think we're going to see a lot of damage to this country and we're going to see Europe running rings around them.
Is hugging close hard Brexit. Why is she doing that? It's not because she necessarily believes in it. It's in order to manage her party. The last time a Conservative leader did precisely what they believed in with regard to Europe was John Major, rather than in order to manage the party. And I think that's a very significant problem, and that was certainly perceived on the doorstep. And if anything, what Richmond Park says, above all else, is stop and think again about this relentless and high-speed pursuit of hard Brexit.
Forgive me, but
this is
a travesty.
It's not telling
let me ask Daniel Hannan.
Shut up, sit at the back.
What about that?
At every opportunity, the Prime Minister has said she wants us to have the closest relationship with the EU. She says we're going to be their closest neighbour, their best friend. You know, no one is talking about ending our diplomatic, our military, our commercial, our security links with the EU. We're talking about living under our own laws while remaining engaged and interested in the affairs of our immediate neighbours. We have a huge stake in their prosperity, if for no other reason than that prosperous neighbours make good customers. So no one's talking about turning our backs on Europe. We're talking about a repatriation of powers within the context of a continuing commercial relationship.
Let's then look, because you say we're not going to relive, as Daniel says, the referendum, but moving forward, so what the Remainers want, because the Remainers are still out there, Ramoners or whatever they're called, and those Remainers who actually would like to see a second referendum are people like your former boss, Tony Blair, and he now wants to start up a not-for-profit institute. Do we need somebody like Tony Blair to lead the charge, a strong figure?
Well, I certainly think that look, anybody who's got a contribution to make this debate should be making it. Anybody who cares about the future of Britain, whatever side of the argument they're on, should be fighting for it. And I don't know anything in British political history that says if you lose a debate and you lose an argument, you have to sort of suddenly say you agree with people that you actually fundamentally disagree with and think are damaging the country.
Thank you all very much indeed.